And I think that lends itself to another key element of ensuring everybody contributes to the session, and that's to ask. You not ask them specifically, as Rich has just alluded to, but actually ask questions. Because if, as the facilitator, we're in tell mode and we're imparting information, then the audience, whoever the audience is, will sort of almost default to going, okay, well, you're telling me some stuff then. I'll sit here quietly and absorb.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rich from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rob from Thinking Focus.
And the question is, when I'm facilitating, how can I ensure everyone contributes to the session? So this podcast is part of a little short series we're doing on facilitation, because we do lots of facilitation here at Thinking Focus. In fact, primarily, that's kind of what we do. I've asked Rich and Rob to come onto this podcast because they've got some experience in facilitating. I got told off earlier for saying, lots, but it must be 100 years worth between the two of them.
It's moved from 20 years to 40 years to now 100 years.
Okay,
yeah, really.
But you've been doing it for a while, and you do lots of facilitation with lots of different groups. So we're going to tap into your expertise. And really what I want to focus on now is those tricks and techniques that you have to get people to actually join in. Because, we've all been in a meeting where somebody's doing their emails in the corner, or somebody else is slightly distracted, or the quiet one never gets a word in edgeways. When you're facilitating, how do you get over all those issues?
Well, I think you've mentioned one already, and one is think about what the possible distractions might be in that session and look to remove them, or make sure that those distractions are not likely to raise their head, or something like that. I mean, I think for me, the thing about this is make it easy. If you want people to contribute, then remove the likely obstacles or issues that make it difficult for people to contribute. And just
what are the typical ones? What do you normally see that gets in the way?
I think distractions. So, everyone's used to having their phone, everyone's used to having their laptop, etc. So are there some sort of rules of engagement that either are company norms or that you need to introduce to make sure that actually when you're in the room for this particular session, whilst we're doing that, we're not doing other things? And that might not be answering the phone, answering emails, all that sort of stuff.
I want to ask a question here, and I don't want this to feel like I'm having a pop about age again, but has all the technology made facilitation harder? I mean, if you think back to before people would walk in with laptops or smartphones, was it easier then? Or were the distractions just different?
I don't know what you mean. I'm not old enough. Rich, you can take that one up.
I'm not contributing to this session.
Okay, then. Yeah. I don't think Paul's created psychological safety yet.
No, I need to go listen to our podcast on that.
You need to go and listen to podcast on that, yeah.
I think potentially it has, because everyone is always on. There's accessibility, and people feel the need to do that. But actually, I think we've also moved around the corner for that. So I don't know if you've ever been in sessions before where the facilitator, and I'm going back probably about 15 years now, would go, surrender your mobile phone, put it in this bucket at the front, because we don't want those distractions. And none of us do that anymore. It's sort of an acknowledgement that you just have a bit of a rule, a nice, quiet, open rule up front to go, do you know what? If you need to, because you're expecting a call, then please just pay respect to everybody else in the room and, take your calls outside the room, step out, go and do this, go and do that.
I think that's right. Most groups self-moderate with that. So occasionally they don't. And I know we've all worked with a few customers of ours where people will come in with a laptop and plonk it down on. We try and remove barriers. We talked about that in previous podcasts. Remove tables and things out of the way to make that harder, but also, so people communicate better. But we'll bring a laptop in, plonk it down, or we'll even, I had one recently where a guy went and sat at the back on his laptop. So we got the chairs, position people sit on, and he didn't sit on one of those. He took one, put it to the back, sat with his laptop. So even when you try and create an environment to minimize distractions, people will still do that. One of the things that often works, depending on the topic, is to take people out of the office to a different location.
Yeah.
So if you take them to whether it's, you work with the people you're working with, say, look, let's do this out of the office, because there's a different mindset in the office to out of the office.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? We assign rules. We assign ways of working, two environments.
Yeah.
So the office comes with a set of expectations, one of which is busy, 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 got to do things, got to answer emails, got to be in touch with people.
Yeah, and I've had it where people, you're in the meeting and then there's a knock at the door. Someone comes and says, "Well, excuse me, could I just get,
I need
Sarah?
John.
Could I get Sarah or John, whoever, for 10 minutes?" And they go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then they go out, and that might keep happening, or you get people that at lunchtime say, dash off back to wherever. That's fine, but the problem is when they go off back to the day job, they've left the thinking that you were doing and they've gone back to normality, and you need to try and break that sometimes to get them in a different physical space. So you go, right, let's go and do this somewhere else. Let's move it to a different venue where you leave those rules behind, where people can't grab you at lunchtime, where people can't interrupt the meeting and drag you back into the day-to-day, because we need to think about this particular topic.
So part of getting them to contribute is basically getting them to be present in that session.
Yeah, create the right environment. That almost goes back to any sort of facilitation or any session or any training sort of, instruction that anybody might have had. It's like, is the environment conducive to learning? So you think about all of those things where you go, I need to make sure that I can make it easy for people to contribute. And that's getting rid of, that's why we get rid of tables. Rich mentioned that before. But not only do we get rid of tables, so that physical obstacle, but we actually then, if people are just sitting in just at seats, just using chairs and not having tables, you don't do that classroom style. Don't do that in rows. Do that in a sort of a U shape or something, because then people are facing each other. So it's helping them to contribute towards each other and be part of a discussion, a conversation, rather than sitting next to a neighbour. They're actually, we're here together and we're meant to be discussing things together. So that helps.
One of the other tricks you can use to get people to contribute. Some people are more confident than others, so some will be much more confident to speak, and some people might dominate that. So one of the things you can do is break out into smaller groups for discussions. Don't just have it all as one big group.
Yeah.
Because what happens then is if you say you've got 12 people and you put them in some small groups, people that don't want to speak in front of the full group might speak in the smaller group, and you can move around the groups and listen to what's being said and see if everyone's contributing. So that can really help. So what you don't want to do is make the assumption that because someone's quiet in the whole group that they're not contributing. So if you break them out, that helps. Giving people stuff like Post-it notes to write stuff on helps, because I can write things down, put it on the wall without having to speak it if I'm not confident in speaking in front of others. And then mix the groups up. So if you've got, small groups talking about one topic, the next time you do it, mix it up, put people with different people, so it breaks up some of the dynamics. You might want to keep them with certain people because of the dynamics as well. So, there's pros and cons for both. So that sort of stuff encourages people to contribute in different ways, because what you're not doing is you're not doing a session here that's about building everyone's confidence to speak in front of everyone, because some people really, really don't like it.
No.
That's okay, as long as you can see they're contributing in the background.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really valid point, because the contribution piece is we don't necessarily need every single person to contribute the same level. We just need to make sure that, somebody who might be quieter, there's still the potential for contribution, and that we get some contribution from them. You're always going to get a contribution from the people who are the most confident. Use people's names. As well as encouraging people to talk early on, one of the sort of standard sort of social pieces of etiquette is, well, let's introduce each other. Let's find out a little bit about each other. Even if the whole group knows each other well, it's like, let's just make sure, and you introduce yourself. So we have, as facilitators, we have a responsibility. I think it's a privilege. It's a great thing to do. But if somebody's introduced themselves to you and they've shared their name, we need to use their name. And if you use names, you'll get people to talk.
Well, that's really good as well, because it sounds really simple, that. But one of the things you can do is, if, let's say, Paul's not spoken much, you can look to where Paul is sitting, gesture to Paul, and just say, Paul, is there anything you'd like to add?
What sort of gesture do you usually use with Paul?
I was about to say, Paul's not spoken much because you can't get a word in edgeway with you two, but that's...
But there's other things you can do. So you could, say, Paul, is there anything you want to add? And Paul might say, well, yeah, actually there is something, or no, there isn't, but that's fine. But the other thing is, if you don't want to put people on the spot, is if you've got Rob on one side of the room speaking a lot, when he finishes speaking, say, Rob, that's great, thank you. You can look across to the other side of the room and say, anything we'd like to add from over here, without calling anyone out, but just by gesturing with your hands to certain people, in sort of inviting them to speak. So that's another possible way of doing it.
So no, I think that's a valid point. And I mean, just before we use the names one, and I know we've talked about this in other podcasts. Part of that is also thinking about cultural differences. Because some of the teams are sort of cross geographies, cross cultural, and in some instances you'll have some cultural groups whose, unless they're spoken to directly and unless their name has been used, they won't talk. Even though they want to contribute, they will not talk to you.
That is a really good point. There are some cultures where you need to be invited to speak.
Yeah, Japan, Korea just come to mind as two very easy examples. Unless you sort of address the individual themselves, they might be busting a gut. They might have tons of information they could impart with their colleagues, but they have to be invited to talk.
So are you, as a facilitator, almost kind of keeping track of who's in the room and how much they've spoken and who hasn't spoken for a while?
Yeah,
yes,
definitely. That is one of the things you're doing. And you're sort of asking yourself the question, are they okay?
Yeah.
Are they all right with this? Where's their head at, sort of thing. And most of the time, by doing some of these things, you can work that out. If you can't, and you still think they're being quite quiet and they're unsure, then you might just, over lunchtime or coffee break, just have a chat. And I wouldn't go up and say, are you all right? Because you've not said anything. I would just say, hey, how's it going? What do you think so far? Where's your head at with this stuff? And just see what you can find out. And that might just satisfy you. Think, yeah, I think they're okay. Or you might think, oh no, they're not happy about this. So then you might have to do something that says, look, to everybody, over lunch just picked up, there's a few people not quite sure about where we're at. So let's just get some Post-it notes and do, what unhelpful thinking have we got about this? What helpful thinking have we got? And just try and flush it out in some sort of way like that.
Yeah. I think that lends itself to another key element of ensuring everybody contributes to the session. And that's to ask. You not ask them specifically as Rich has just alluded to, but actually ask questions, because if, as the facilitator, we're in tell mode and we're imparting information, then the audience, whoever the audience is, will sort of almost default to going, okay, well, you're telling me some stuff, then I'll sit here quietly and absorb, or not. They might switch off. So by asking questions, every single individual knows that actually a question's being asked, so there's an expected answer coming back. And am I going to volunteer the answer to the question, or is somebody going to ask me for my name and encourage me to actually participate? But posing questions to the group or posing questions to an individual will of course encourage contribution again.
One of the things I think that is often you've got another thing playing in is we're not all the same, are we? So some people will jump in, some people will be more reflective, and if someone's been more reflective, and you sort of realize they're more of a reflective person, then actually that's fine. They just want some time to think about things.
Yeah.
So you just got to sort of keep that in mind. One of the other things is sometimes in these conversations, we've all got fears, haven't we? And one of the fears that we all universally have is, am I good enough? Am I good enough? So that fear can come out sometimes in workshops like this. So people might not contribute because they're just not sure that what they've got to add is valuable.
Yeah.
So what I would do when that happens is encourage someone. So I might turn and say, James, just share some of your thoughts. We were talking earlier, and you got a few really valuable thoughts. And I'd tell them I was going to ask them that. Over the conversation lunch, I'm going to say, look, after lunch, I'm just going to ask you to share a couple of these things. They'll share them, and then you can add some stuff in like that kind of goes, these are really valuable points, because what you're doing is you're making that person then feel, I am good enough. This is okay. So I think that's a really valid thing to keep in your mind as well.
So I just want to move on for a second and just talk to you about sort of the idea. And one of the things I've noticed is that when you're facilitating, if you're asking people to think about something that's too broad, it actually almost closes them down a lot. And if you give people a very narrow frame to think within, a specific question or an area of the topic, it's easier for people if it's much more structured and contained. So it's almost like if you give people a box, they can think within the box quite easily. But if you go, well, what do you think about topic X?
Yeah.
They get almost overwhelmed by the scale of it.
Yeah, that can be true. Yeah. So if you narrow it down a bit and give someone a specific area to think about, that can make things a little bit easier.
Well, I think part of this is, and this is one of the reason that I used the word easy before. It touches on that. It's we have to, as facilitators, think about how can I make contribution as easy as possible for the majority, if not everybody, in this group, whoever's in the session. And having a structure is something that we all really respond well to. And even if that's a very clear agenda and we use signposting to go, this session that we're in, we're going to start here, we're going to go there, we're going to go here, so that when we're actually encouraging the contribution and we're asking questions and having discussions, people can see where that's leading to. It's part of a 3 or 4 or 5 element session or workshop, whatever it happens to be, so that people can see the direction of travel. And as a facilitator, we obviously have to bring those threads together and make that really clear. But I think that's where the structure is. And we can't afford to be too broad, because then and I know you're not suggesting that we are, but I think that's where it helps people to link their contribution to what we're currently talking about and what we're going to be talking about next.
I think it depends. I think it depends who you're working with and what the topic is. But sometimes you might be invited by a senior manager to facilitate something with a more junior group. And that more junior group might not be used to thinking big picture, but the senior manager kind of wants them to. So that would cause an issue, because they might struggle with that, as you said originally in your question, Paul. So you might want to narrow that down a bit. But then you might get other groups that are perfectly capable of doing big picture thinking. And if you narrow them too much, equally that could cause an issue. So I think you've just got to try and understand who it is you're working with and what you're trying to do.
But I also think even with a senior group, sometimes giving them a framework or a model, even something as simple as SWOT, allows people to go, all right, I'm not just thinking of anything now. I'm thinking of this thing in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And so that frame, I think, is much easier to think within than going, all right, let's just talk about product X. What do you think?
Definitely. Give it using frameworks, as Rob said, structures, frameworks for people to think within about certain topics, issues, questions. And we've got millions of them, haven't we, that we use.
Yeah.
Is definitely the way to go, because, we facilitate loads of things, such as help us think about strategy, right? Well, that's a massive thing. So you go, okay, what tool do you normally use for that? Most people go, we don't. Or Excel, or something like that. But and there's loads of tools you can use. So you kind of go, right. So my suggestion is we use, something. So you might give a suggestion of what the model is, and we're going to work through it in this way. And you normally find that people go, oh, that's great, yeah, because what they're seeing is actually there's a structure to this to walk us through it. So I agree. I think a framework, model, structure usually helps with whatever the topic is.
Is there any other tricks that you use if you get a group that suddenly, I don't know, maybe after lunch and they're all looking a bit tired and they're just not contributing? What are the kind of little sneaky tricks that you do that kind of liven people up and get them talking again?
What, like unlike alcohol, you mean?
Well, I think that's probably the thing that caused the problem in the first place.
Wait, I tell you what, it is if you work in some countries, because I've worked in some countries, and with the lunch comes wine, and you think, oh, here we go.
Well, Richard, you and I have a particular memory of a workshop we run together where lunch basically ruined the whole afternoon, because their view of lunch and our view of lunch were not in line at all.
No, they weren't. That's very true. Things you can do, I think, exercises, if you spot that, getting them to do some exercises where they do them up on their feet, move around, talk to lots of different people, put them in groups, then get the groups to, put things on the wall and then walk around the walls and look at all that sort of stuff. Just try and get some energy into what you're doing, even if you're just going over a little bit of the previous discussion before lunch, even if it's that sort of thing. Just
recap.
Yeah, recap adds energy into the room.
I mean, you can even do, sort of a very participative, obviously, sort of reflection piece where you sort of get people going, right, what have we gone over in the morning, and what have we learned from that so far? What questions have we got? So that it's just a bridge, if you like, get people back in the room. They've had a break, they've had a lunch, whether it's alcohol infused or not. But you're sort of going, right, let's get back to the room.
Stick people in groups and go, what are all the questions you've got from this morning? What are all the observations you've made? Get them to capture it.
Yeah.
Share it. That sort of thing would sort of pick energy up straight after. If you notice.
If you notice
that energy's dipped during a particular period, doing something like that can get it up and working again. You can even do things where, if you've got the right environment, where you can say, right, find a partner. Okay, I want you to just go for 10 minutes, 10-minute walk. This might be like around the hotel that you're in or around the site or whatever. Come back in 10 minutes, but I want you to have considered X, Y, and Z, and we're just going to share that when you come back.
So basically stuff that builds energy back up as well as getting them thinking again. So movement, excitement, just something to change the frame of the state that they're in.
I think one of the things, Rob, you said there makes me think, which I think we do, and we know we're doing it, is you're also signposting all the time.
Yeah.
So you signpost in the morning what's coming all day. You signpost that breaks are coming up. You signpost lunch is coming up. At lunch, before lunch, you'll be signposting, look, when we come back, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then when you come back, you'll say, right, I said we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So you're signposting stuff all the time, so people know where you're heading, they know where you're going, and that can help with energy as well, because you can say, right, I said before lunch we were going to do X, Y, and Z. Before we do that, I just want to recap on everything we did this morning. I'm going to put you in, 4 groups, discuss this, and this, share this with everyone when we come back together in 10 minutes, and then you're into the next thing that you signposted. So I think that is a little thing you learn as well, because people need to know where you're going. It's a bit like if you go out for a walk. You have a bit of a destination in mind, even if you're just going for a loop around the local area you're walking, you know where you're ending up. So you're keeping people aware of the fact that you're on a journey towards a certain point is useful to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've covered a huge number of different things here, but it sounds like I've got a few of them that I've written down over the session. I may have missed a couple, by the way. So if you want to contribute some ideas, see what I'm doing there, feel free. But here's my summary. So first up, remove the distractions, because that's going to help people contribute. You talked a lot about using small groups, so because it's about the contribution, you're not trying to teach them to public speak. So allow people to contribute in different ways by changing group sizes and structures and mixing people up. You also said something really interesting about the Post-it notes and giving people different ways to contribute. So actually, it's equally valid to write it down as it is to say it.
And added to that, if you get people to write things on Post-its and you put them on a wall, what you might do as the facilitator is choose to go through a few of them. You read it out. So you might say, oh, there's this one here. It says blah, 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 blah. Can I just ask, where did that come from? And, Sandra says, oh, that was me. And so, right, Sandra, just help me out here. What were you aiming at there? And that person might add a little bit more, but you've not made them have to sort of do a big thing.
Yeah. And then the other sort of 3 things I really picked up on, one was about actually how sometimes you're putting energy back in, which I know we've talked about on a different podcast, but actually when people stop contributing, you're mixing it up a little bit and getting people active and moving around to create energy. You're using people's names to invite them in and giving them permission to speak. And that last point that I think you talked about, Richard, a while ago, which is you're constantly signposting. You're getting people ready for the next thing because you're constantly telling them how the day's going and what's coming up.
Yeah.
So almost they're thinking about it before you get there. Did I miss anything?
Oh, you're very good, aren't you?
I'm learning. You're teaching well.
No, I don't think so. I suppose we could go on forever with lots of this stuff because there's all sorts of little things you could do. But I think broadly speaking, that sums most of it up. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Next time on The Question Is.
When they start to gain a little bit of trust in you, the facilitator, in that you are not there to get at them, or that you're not taking sides, or that you're not going to tell them that they're wrong, and help them see and feel that what they say is not going to be criticised, that you're encouraging lots of opinion from people, often these things melt away quite quickly.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.